it's an honor to have Jason from Story Protocol come join David and me for this podcast. It's actually the first kind of AMA opinion I ever did. So it's really an honor to have Jason here and do this.
The first public, yeah.
Yeah.
Internal ones.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe I'll have Jason introduce himself, and then we introduce ourselves, and then we'll get
Great. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks, Bill and David, for having me on. It's an honor to be the first guest, and I think with my performance, it'll hopefully only be uphill from here. So I'll try to set a low bar for everyone that they can easily cross. But anyways, no, I'm just joking. But thank you guys again for having me. It's a real pleasure, and I'm a big fan of what PinAI is doing. So just a bit background of me. The reason I say that is because I actually started off my career at DeepMinds, and I'm still obsessed with AI, and I think it has such potential for humanity, but also such risk as well, right? And I feel like right now we're sort of in this like 5 to 10 year range where we are at a historical inflection point, and the actions that we all take as technologists do have a big outcome on whether we go down that happy path or something that's maybe not as great. And so I think what Pin is doing is really exciting, and what Story is doing is sort of related, which is, in this new Napster moment where content is now being distributed globally, you can reach 1 to 10 million people with a single click on TikTok or on Twitter for free. And now you have generative AI adding fuel to the fire, right? You have the ability for everyone to not only reach the entire world with a single click for free, but also to have a Hollywood studio in their phone, in their bedroom, right? And so everyone in the world is a creator. And now a lot of that creativity is coming forth on the internet. You're seeing things like Drake and The Weeknd's remix, like just using their voices. You have Harry Potter in the style of Balenciaga getting 10 million views on YouTube. And these are all really exciting experiments. But at the same time, just like with Napster, we have no idea how to properly compensate the people and the humans that are generating their voice, their style, all these interesting artistic outputs. And so what Story is really focused on is using blockchains for something beyond finance and beyond money, which is to provide a new type of almost like IP system or legal system where people can register their content, their style, their voice, their image, their likeness on Story and set the terms for how others can use it in a programmatic way. And so essentially an AI can train on your data, but it knows exactly how much it needs to compensate you, whether that's a revenue share or an upfront fee. And any other creator tool or consumer app or even social media app can also leverage content from around the world that's registered on Story in their app. And so it's kind of this composable global IP graph that we're building. And obviously the biggest use case for us is AI, because right now no one really understands how do we create a sustainable future where both, we can have OpenAI and other large model companies be able to generate the best models in the world, but also to give creators their fair share, right? So that's kind of what Story is focused on.
Yeah, cool. Maybe David, you can introduce us.
Yep. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with Jason and Bill. I'm David. I'm one of the co-founder of PinAI. So we are building this personal AI network. That's how we think about it, where basically you have like a personal AI, which is your own model that as a user you own. It has access to all your context. And then basically it can serve queries that you have, or it can help you find a match with any type of agent AI services out there, helping you with intent formation is from your query to a structured intent, and then with routing, and then we have this blockchain protocol that basically it does intent matching. So it's quite interesting. I was thinking about there is a lot of complementarities with Story as well. I see on one hand, this is kind of a huge green field in front of both of our projects, right? Mm-hmm. Because traditionally, what blockchain applications are trying to do is basically do some innovation on DeFi, for example, where there is already huge industry and system, regulated system already built, and you are trying to kind of innovate a little bit at the fringes. Maybe have some efficiency gain that sometimes is 10x efficiency over DeFi. Then you can lease assets very cheaply, right? But you still have this big incumbent that you either disrupt or you hit against. So now it's basically a Story is in front all this new green field of new IP that gets generated with AI. And similarly, we have this new paradigm of the internet where like it's basically populated of all these smart agents that offer services directly or on behalf of someone else. And that's, I think, where we can basically use these permissionless protocols to like build it better, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited for this job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, this is Bill. I'm another co-founder of PinAI, and yeah, I have been working on AI for the last more than 10 years. And one thing I really was like obsessed throughout my PhD research is actually like how to price data. Like it's actually one of the unsolvable problems, because before you touch the data, you actually cannot understand like what's the value of data. And like I think the way that story and PNI are like two separate angles that can have very good complementary views on like how to price data. In terms of story, it's more like view it from IP angle, and then if you train on that data, like how much value the model can have. In terms of PNI, we are more focusing on if we use the data as contextual data for inference, like how much additional like value can we generate by like adding this personalization layer, by like having our model know the person much better than the old way. We also have a way to measure the value of data. So the PNI approach is probably more close to how, say, like Facebook ads marketplace, or like say TikTok say video recommendation measure the value of data. And I think the story way is like a natural progression of the traditional kind of like the IP is like a Disney way of like looking at data and looking at kind of like how valuable things are. So I think there is a good merging angle. For example, one merging angle I saw is Facebook has this experiment, right? Like Mark Zuckerberg is really rich, so he can get all the celebrities to be like making personal AI stuff. He can have like a Snoop Dogg created like a AI chatbot that is like a Snoop Dogg's kind of slightly more personalized version with some prompt and their sound. So I think that is an angle that I can see. It's almost like the experiment that is like an intersection of stories view and PNS view. Like, create a personal AI that has all your, it's like a Snoop Dogg's IP, right? His voice, his sound, even the prompt. It's kind of like his IP.
Right.
So it's very interesting that I think in the future, there would be a lot of strong intersections of like PN.
100%. And I think one of the most obvious is what you just mentioned, which is that I think the next Drake, the next Snoop Dogg, the next big artist even, right? The next Disney is going to be someone that knows how to lean into AI rather than someone that's trying to opt out, right? It is important to me that people have the ability to opt out. That's only fair, but I really do think in terms of commercial success, imagine if you put your voice on story and maybe, you know, it's your sort of pin AI, personal AI, but then you can actually scale that to the world. So anyone can create, if you have a million fans around the world, like maybe 10% of them are actually really, really good at songwriting and much better than you, right? So now they can leverage your voice, create much better songs than you could create as an artist, and then monetize and distribute it. And they have skin in the game to advertise for you on your behalf, right? So I think we're just going to see the new generation of like AI powered arts and IP overtake the existing siloed model, which is basically like one creator, right? And maybe they have a team, but imagine if you could just turn your IP into a network. That's the really powerful aspiration.
And I think the future of art is not only the traditional art format of like a sound, like image or a video. I feel like the future of art can even be like this interactive bot, right? I feel like character AI or like the meta experiment, it all only scratch the surface by just giving different prompts. But I think in the future, when the AI that truly have your streaming updated personal data, it can be like a kind of AI that is like your best girlfriend or like your best personal assistant that is be with you 24 hours, both solve problem with you and offer like emotional values to you.
Right.
And those can be like one of your favorite celebrity. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a world that we are working into. Whether story are successful, opinion are successful, I think that's kind of a deterministic path that I see it will go to.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things about what you guys are doing at Pin is, I mean, you think about platforms that have network effects, it's basically, why would any marginal application want to use like pin as opposed to just start their own service. And I think the answer is really clear for you guys, which is really interesting. And that's the idea that if you already have a lot of information around someone that they own, then every single application is going to want access to that information, right? So that they can provide a better service. In the same way that Facebook, Twitter, these sort of Web2 APIs were super valuable because you're building Zynga, you're building a mobile or web-based game. Like you're going to want to know what like who these people's friends are, right? Yeah. And so the problem, of course, is that you get really powerful network effects, but then if Mark Zuckerberg or whoever at Sheryl Sandberg decides, hey, like this is not profitable for Facebook, then it goes away. And that happened with Twitter and that happened with Facebook. And so for Pin, it's cool that you guys have these obvious network effects, but then the ability to keep it immutable and user owned. And that's also why Story is built on chain, right? Because we're building an IP system in the same way that Ethereum is building a monetary system. You don't want the ability when people are putting all of their life's work and their IP and their name and their image and their likeness on Story, you don't want that. You don't want us or anyone to be able to tamper with the rules. And so that's, I think, a real case for blockchains, but also for like building network effects in this way.
Yeah, that's actually a great angle. For personal AI, we actually went through exactly the same experiment when we think about, okay, if we want like every user to own their own data and create their own AI, but like where should the data go, right? Like the data should stay on their personal device, but how do the rest of the world get access to it? The fact that some other model or like some other service can get access to my preference should live on chain, right? Otherwise, we are creating another Facebook, and it's actually like physically impossible to create the new Facebook. Both, I guess, economical wise, today's internet is all kind of monopolized by these big players, and also in terms of the regulation, I think it's even getting harder, right? Like I think the regulation scrutiny of like data privacy gets it almost impossible to create another like big company that accumulates so much personal data. So the only way that are viable to us is through like a blockchain that we actually let everyone own their own data and have this open protocol that the data communicated through like a smart contract.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I guess the next question I want to ask everyone is, what's your contrarian view about AI for the next 5 years? That only 10% or less of your peers would agree.
10% or less of my peers.
Yeah.
You're just asking me to piss people off. I've been obviously really focused on the blockchain space, so I can only speak from the perspective of someone who had some training in AI, but now is more looking in at what my colleagues are doing now at DeepMind is so impressive. So like I think one of my beliefs around AI is that we have this new Moore's law, right? I think people are talking about scaling laws, and if you throw in more data, that's higher quality. You throw in more compute, that's cheap. You essentially get out with the same model paradigm. You get out better and better performance, which I think is largely true and can continue to be true. But even if we accept the reality of these scaling laws, which I'm not going to argue against, I think that there's a real swath of economic value that isn't going to be fully captured by this generative paradigm. And the reason why I say that is because there's so many use cases where you only need 80 to 90% success, right? So generating code, creating a document for marketing, or creating internal communications, or helping someone think through something, or therapy, or whatever it is, like AI girlfriend, right? Like these, you don't really need to have 100% accuracy in a conversation. It's not even true that it's not even clear that exists. Like, what does that even mean? But there are domains where you need to have 99.999% fidelity, right? Finance with trillions of dollars, a global banking system, fraud, things like that. Defense, right? Hard tech, even things as simple as opening or closing a garage door, right? Like, would you trust a chatbot to be the arbiter for your garage door?
Not in the mood.
Yeah, probably not, right? Because even though you got a ChatGPT 7, but then someone else is going to jailbreak it, right? Yeah. So there is some sort of, I think, limitation that isn't being properly accounted for in the market, where you do need like deterministic AI to some degree. Not just deterministic, because I think current models are largely deterministic, but I mean deterministic in the sense of they operate axiomatically, right? Like human.
Yeah.
So basically, there's no way, if you had a security guard, like, yes, the security guard could have conversation with someone who's trying to convince the security guard to get in, and maybe like on the margins and get tricked. But point is, like, as a human, you operate on axioms. If you're getting paid to not open the garage door, like, you're just not going to let anyone open it, right? But like an AI, like you're seeing examples of JP Morgan chatbots saying yes to random customer requests because they got jailbroken, right? Or, they're doing people's math homework for them because the chatbot is running ChatGPT 4 in the background. And so you can just use that for free compute, right? But my point is, I think one of my more controversial beliefs is that regardless of scaling laws, like there are basically like fundamental limits to this modality of AI, which are not necessarily like addressable within this modality. So you kind of need to imagine like what and AI researchers have been working on this for a long time, but like what does an AI look like that can complement the generative regime where you do have first principles axioms and you do get guarantees around 100% accuracy.
Yeah. Actually, it's a very good point, and like my view is like very similar, and like my answer to that is like basically it's blockchain protocols. They have the hardness that like today's AI is right? And it's that, and basically also like maybe like the older way of like doing control systems, like that's probably not going away, right? I mean, like we've been building things like that for like maybe 100 years. So like the way I see it's like AI will kind of like live on top. And I think like the capability is going to increase in like the direction that we have right now with like more generative capability, more intelligence. But then like the reasoning is already here, and then tool use, I think that will be like the next kind of like evolution. But maybe the controversial take is this may not be controversial in crypto. I think that in this tool use interface for like this high fidelity system, like basically blockchains will play a huge role. And I can totally see like a few years from now, like having like even a ride sharing marketplace on the blockchain once autonomous vehicles are kind of capable enough and you can remove the human component, right? A few years ago, there was like this wave of like Uber on blockchain, but it doesn't really work because basically like you have like this kind of human in the loop and a lot of operations. But I think like if you fast forward a few years in this world where like it's like a lot of autonomous agents that are acting in the economy, like then what provides that hardness and that axiomatic kind of backbone is like
that's an interesting thesis. Because your argument is basically as things become more autonomous, then blockchains become more necessary because they can intermediate. That's interesting.
At the same speed.
Actually, I always have this thought, and it's like kind of technologist dream since 9 years ago. Like in 2015, Stanford, we have this blockchain class. Damone is teaching, and Balaji is our TA. And the one class we're doing this experiment of like, okay, so the theory is like, okay, blockchain it might actually be the machine money, not like human money, right? Since it doesn't tie to credit system, and it's more like money owned by the private key, not by a specific person. So in some sense, the private key can be owned by some
delegated to like
And we were talking about specifically this auto-driving car. As in 2015, we have like optimism and hope. Oh, auto-driving car is a few years away. Turns out it's not there yet. And like blockchain will be so scalable, it can support like machine-to-machine transaction. We're still moving towards there. So the world actually moved much slower, but the direction that we see actually is like slowly becoming true. That when you go to like a stop sign, a four-way stop sign, instead of like who arrives first, who can go, it's more like for like auto-driving car comes and who pays more. That's like, okay, let's beat it. And then let's go, right? Like every single car has a wallet and the beat and And then when you like really want to say your wife is about to give birth and you really want to get to a hospital super fast, you just pay everyone on the highway to give you away as if you are like a police car, and then you can like race through, right? And you can even pay the kind of in today's traffic system to like pay all the fines, and no one stop you and just like drive all the way to hospital. It might be like $1,000 drive, but if your wife is giving birth, it might be worth it. So kind of saying this word like slowly coming true, right? It's still very hard, as I think it's not very compatible with today's legal system. But I feel like intrinsically the most optimism like technologists believe, okay, like math is kind of the new law, and we are kind of implementing a global scale infrastructure for at least the law for machine, right? We might not be able to set up the new law for global citizens or human beings, but like I think we are setting up the law for machine.
Super interesting. Something comes to mind is which is kind of bringing us back maybe like to the next few years evolution of like both Pin AI and story side is like one thing that can be like at the intersection of both is like how do you discover the value of IP, right? And kind of related to this idea of like bidding on like micro rights, right? Like do you guys have like any work in that direction? Obviously, we've done some work on it around like intent matching and kind of like discovery value of like different type of agent services. But I'm curious, like from the IP perspective, right? Like there is this data that like sometimes like you don't really know how much is valued until like people start using it. So like,
yeah, I think it's such a complex question. The interesting thing is to look at what's the state of the art, and the state of the art is there is very, very, very little market for IP right now. Like the market size is huge, right? It's $1 trillion industry, but why I say there's not a good pricing mechanism is because it's Disney owns all this IP, right? And so they have some theoretical value, and that's accounted for in the total addressable market. But then there's not a frequent number of transactions. So you have Disney with 100 lawyers, and then maybe they want to so now they want to use Spider-Man, and Sony owns Spider-Man. So now you have this deal that goes back and forth, and so there's price discovery, but it's one mega transaction, and there's no visibility. Like maybe there's some report of how much that transaction is for, but the economics are closed, right? So now other participants in the market, not only is it very expensive for them to engage in these transactions because they also need to have a 100-person legal team. They don't even have visibility into how much that transaction was if they wanted to make a comparable transaction, right? So you have this very interesting market structure in IP today where you have a massive size of the asset class, but then very little price discovery or very little quote unquote liquidity, right? And because the transactions are so large and so opaque. And so what Story's trying to do is, I mean, it's going to be a very weird future if Story succeeds, because now we're opening up the world for a whole universe of applications, and Pin AI can be one of them where they have methods for pricing it, right? And so you see this a little bit on the margins, like YouTube, Twitter, they start paying their creators, but it's all proprietary, right? Who knows if they're paying you based on the value of your IP, or if they're paying you just because they are targeting this demographic of creators, so they're trying to give them money for free, right? So you have again, that's not really price, that's more of a subsidy. And so when it comes to true like market forces, there's not been the infrastructure that allows people to scalably create long tail transactions around IP in a frictionless way. So Story isn't so focused on pricing as much as it is on like unlocking the ability for applications to price by unlocking the technology to have these low friction, high transparency transactions on the IP side.
Yeah. Actually, I was curious in the specific case we talk about, celebrities' personal data.
Yeah.
That's kind of a good angle of IP, but also it's like personal data. How do you view, like, let's say if we create a Taylor Swift personal AI using Taylor Swift all chat history and probably the non-sensitive part of that, and also like all the selfies and all that of like Taylor Swift, like how much should we pay Taylor Swift? Do we have some mental model? Or
yeah, well, I mean, what we've seen at Story so far is that people like the artist owns the AI version of themselves, right? So artist has like an AI clone, so to speak, or an AI avatar. And then it's almost like the existing model where if you want Taylor Swift to perform, or if you want to license her song to play at your wedding or whatever it is, like there is some sort of licensing deal done. Basically, I think what's going to happen now is that through like Pin AI, which is going to hold all the creators' data, and then through Story, which allows for this sort of pricing to happen, or these transactions to happen on an economic level, people are like Taylor Swift, for example, can set terms programmatically for how others can engage with their AI clone or AI avatar, right? Yeah. So she might say, okay, well, I'm Taylor Swift, so I mean, I'm going to charge a lot, right? So if you pay me $1 million upfront, or maybe 500,000, right? Like some high amount upfront in USDC, and share, let's say 25% of the revenues on the back end that you make, if you're going to make revenues, then you can instantly generate a license, a real binding contract, both on chain and off chain, to use my IP. And my agent will then go sing at your party or whatever it is, right? Yeah. So I think you're now going to have the ability to not only have agents that represent a creator's IP and are basically a digital clone of them and can scale everywhere, but also the ability to permissionlessly through an API leverage their IP, right? And so what you're saying, David, with the hard rules, like Story is building the hard rules for how AI agents themselves, which can be representatives of real people, how they can like automatically and permissionlessly expand and grow and monetize.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting world we're entering, right? Like previously, when we designed the Pin AI protocol, we're mostly thinking about average person. where like we kind of measure the value of their data by like if they do like a transaction, like we add personalization, how much value do we add to them? But I think the celebrity angle is actually a very interesting different angle where the like every single like collection of personal data is much more valuable, and they have like a much stronger ability to amplify. It's kind of like we were thinking more of the like a Facebook scenario, and this is more like the Twitter scenario where it's like one celebrity to all of their fans. So
and just to touch upon something you mentioned earlier, Bill, is I think that we are moving into a world where code is law. And I don't think it's a sort of happenstance or coincidence of history that smart contracts are called contracts, because it really does mimic, I mean, through software, the binding commitments that legal contracts are, right? There's signature, I mean, the whole language of the cryptography and blockchain development is centered around legal analogies. But I think in the future, we're actually going to see them transcend being mere analogies into something more like an informal rule of law online.
And the beauty of it is that like really you have access for everyone, right? In the sense like maybe like as Bill was saying, this creator case is interesting because like it's kind of a different scale and magnitude of like how much this data will be used, but the same system can be used by the average person or like by anyone, because the cost to like enforce this contract is so low that like you don't need an army of lawyers, like you don't need like some agents or a firm like doing like things for you. You just need some AI agents that are probably very cheap, and then some smart contracts.
Exactly.
That's a good point, right? We are seeing like a creator moving from only the Taylor Swift type with the proper like lawyer and agent team to be able to monetize for them to TikTok, where it's like if you have past a certain threshold of view of like viewers, you can start to make money and make a living on TikTok. And then now we're moving towards basically everyone can be their creator. They can both be like fans of Taylor Swift, but also be their own creator. And
and it's going to be necessary because now everyone can create. Right. Like I think YouTube and TikTok are interesting because they leverage like two things. One is broadband access, so you can upload and download video. Anyone can do that. And also the second is iPhones, smartphones, where you have like a high quality video camera. But now it's okay, throw all that away, right? Because now everyone has the ability to create Hollywood film without any physical hardware. And so the amount of people creating epic content, high quality, engaging content is just it's going to be 8 billion people, right? And so that completely changes assumptions around how you monetize. You can't even as a platform like. It's very hard to adjudicate. Like I know TikTok has a massive team figuring out how to pay everyone, but soon it's going to explode. The abundance of content is going to explode. And so you're going to need some sort of programmatic way of figuring that out.
That's actually very, very cool future. And think there is a strong collaboration point that we should actually help everyone to become their own stars.
100%.
Okay. Pivot a little bit on the question, I guess. We were already seeing Story have a big ecosystem, and there are very strong entrepreneurs that decide to actually build on like Story's chain and all that. Jason, you can share some of your insights. How do you curate this ecosystem? As like PNI, we're also trying to set this ecosystem where other apps can like develop on our chain and all that.
Well, I think it's a good question. I think we're very lucky and we've learned a lot from other ecosystems like Ethereum. I know, David, you're building that yourself. And, I would say we take kind of like a barbell approach. So if you think about the way you can do ecosystem development, I mean, you can go very top heavy on one end of the barbell, which is you're going to basically do BD, right? And you're going to do things that don't scale. So you're going to go have lunch with like an interesting entrepreneur that you meet at a conference, right? And, it's going to take up a lot of time, but maybe they're like very, very interesting entrepreneur and builder that you want to use your tools. The other end, I would say, is more like what Ethereum Foundation has done a really good job of, which is, look, we are super neutral and we are going to put all of our code out there. All of our deliberations, all of our meetings are public. It's basically like open source organization, right? So I think both of those are really valid. I think that there's sort of a depth in the middle. Like you don't want to kind of open source here and there, and then maybe do a few BD deals. You want to basically like have a very, very top heavy approach where like 50% of your time you are going for the biggest, most like established entrepreneurs that you can find. And the reason why you want to do that is because at the end of the day, like even though crypto has been around for like a decade, it still lacks like very, very strong entrepreneurs compared to AI, right? Compared to a lot of these other industries in tech. like SaaS, like just the quality of the teams is on average lower. I think that's quickly changing, but still that's true. And so you want, if there's maybe like, let's say 100 great teams out there looking to build something, maybe even less, 50 at any one time, you want 5 of them to be building on your ecosystem. And that requires like, you have to imagine everyone else is also talking to them too. So you have to have that do things that don't scale approach. But then if you only do that, then you don't get surprised, right? Like what's great about a team is you're always surprised.
Crazy creativity.
Yeah, because you only know what you want and what you're looking for, so you have that sort of bias, and you have you spend your whole time thinking about it as an entrepreneur. So of course you probably have some like correct theses, but what's beautiful about Ethereum is like none of this was planned, right? I mean, when you look at what Vitalik was writing in his white paper, it was like he could not have predicted all of the interesting things that came out of Ethereum. His predictions were very wrong, but that's fine because Ethereum was open. And so it captured all this long tail surprise. So I think like a story, we have a lot of projects that just randomly came up and they started building on us. And then we realized they existed only after the fact and they surprised us. But that's because we open source everything, right? And we try to follow Ethereum's model, but then also we don't think that, if you build it, they will just automatically come. So we need to secure some showcases that can get people excited. So I think we don't really do like anything in the middle, but we really focus on super high priority partnerships and really epic entrepreneurs. And then we have this like sort of like really strong commitment to documenting everything.
I see. So basically one side is like a kind of like a talent discovery. And the other side is like helping them succeed.
Exactly.
Exactly. David, we've been trying to build PNI, but you have been also in this massively successful organization. How do you see this?
I think this is a good approach. I think that for us, basically, like we are probably going to do like the same thing as soon as we launch like a public testnet in a few months. And I also feel that like actually on the Ethereum side is like you can think that like something similar kind of happened, right? In the sense that it's not really BD, but you can still maybe like fund like great entrepreneurs or just great project with the right person, like even with grants. This is what happened with like the original Uniswap grant.
Right.
And that was also a bet, maybe not just on an entrepreneur, but on an idea, like that you can have like exchanges on chain. So I feel that like, especially at the beginning, like you need these two sides, right? Because like the reality is that like these networks we are building, they are going to be like very decentralized and maybe like at some point they will settle. We don't need to innovate in the core protocol anymore, and just the activity will like explode up. But the way we are like setting it up is that we are kind of the prime actor in starting them. And I think at the beginning there needs to be like some curation of like some additional push.
Agreed.
But then open source is like, I think it's fundamental because that's the only way that you can harness that energy and have this like ecosystem that like really grows.
Right. No, I think you're totally right. I've always told the team, a story is like, look, if we have all the ideas around what apps are interesting on Story, like we don't need to build this on blockchain. We could just build it ourselves. We could just be a conglomerate of IP applications, right? Like the whole point about what we're doing, why we're spending so much time and effort building this on chain is anyone can use it and they can trust that they can use it and then they can surprise us. If you're not being surprised about the thing built in your ecosystem, then like you might want to be an app, right? You might want to just, if you have a full conviction on what the right path is to go down.
Yeah, actually, that's like a great kind of lesson for us, right? Like we, as PNI, we currently have a pretty good mini app that is like growing very fast. For the 2 weeks. We get to like 250K users in like probably like a week.
That's really
the first a few days, it's like clearly exponential growth. So that's interesting. But on the other hand, we also feel like we do not have all the ideas. So like what the personal agent should look like, right? Since in AI, honestly, finding a successful product market fit in AI application is very hard. If you count today, there are only, I would say, a few that I would truly consider, okay, like it hits what people really want. Like a search answer is one, maybe like a kind of killing time chat is one, like a code writing one. There's not that many, like a big time succeed, like AI application. So we don't even know what the future will look like. So now we're just trying to bet on few certainties, like, okay, people will need more personal data. to have like better cross-domain preference, and people will want their microtransaction to be recorded on chain, so that there's proper incentive system to incentivize everyone. That's like the infrastructure building, but we also cannot see the future and I don't feel like we have the confidence, ability, and even the vision to become a big conglomerate of like a super app. That's kind of the Chinese internet company approach, right? That build like a huge WeChat, and then let's launch all this kind of like mini apps in my ecosystem.
Yeah.
But now I feel like the new generation approach is very open and different. Yeah, and I think Jason, you prepared a question. Like what?
Oh, did I prepare some questions? Yeah, I mean, look, I think that on my end, right, like I'm curious about like what you're seeing on PinAI. And in particular, I think we talked a lot about this this theme of creativity and how, you know, agents can extend human creativity, but they can also generate their own. So I am curious, like, as you guys are thinking about building this ecosystem and nurturing it, are you guys really focused on thinking about working with companies and with platforms and integrating with them? Or at PinAI, do you actually see like a very like almost like B2C approach or like a peer-to-peer approach where it's actually people integrating their AIs with each other as opposed to integrating with like a platform? And the reason I asked that is because I could see like, you know, one thing that we're seeing at Story is like these creators, they're actually they you know, at first we thought, hey, like at Story, let's integrate just with a bunch of creator platforms. And then Story is a little bit like Stripe, where, you know, you're not like, it's not like Venmo, right? Like you are not using Stripe directly. You're buying a hoodie, you're whatever, buying a shirt, and you happen to use Stripe on whatever website you're doing that. You're not using Stripe in a peer-to-peer way. But now that's kind of our thesis with Story, and that's what's been happening. But now we're starting to see more peer-to-peer transactions where, you know, it's one creator with another creator and they're doing a collab on Story without any app in the middle. So I'm curious, like thinking about PinAI, you guys are building personal AI. So obviously the atomic unit is each person, but then is each person kind of surrounded by a constellation of applications that they're then engaging with? Okay, like my Spotify, my, you know, my AI friend or whatever, therapist. Or is it actually like, you know, I'm going to go and my AI is going to manage my finances between you two because we just had dinner together and now we're like knowing each other, right? So or on-chain splitting payments. So I am curious, like, how you guys think about that, because that's a pattern that we use that Story as well. Super interesting.
Yeah. So let me take on. I actually thought about this, and I think in terms of personal data, unavoidably we have to go with the first way to start with, as a lot of the data today is being saved in like Web 1, Web 2 world of big companies.
Yeah,
and we have to go through the suffer and pain of like have like we basically give user tools for user to like have ideally streaming access of all this data from big platform. It's actually not easy because the big platform are not incentive aligned to give data with us, right? Like initially, we experiment with a few methods. One is of course like because of GDPR and all this data regulation, you can like do systematic dump of all your past data. That way you can allow that, but they can give you basically the most like raw and horrible format possible to comply with the law.
Yeah.
And another approach is like API approach where you want to get a streaming access, but it's technically quite challenging. That's why we even have a protocol called data connector that we want to encourage third-party developers to come in and help us build more of the data connectors to connect different things. Since that's actually a big wall that is pretty hard to climb over for everyone. So that to me is like the step one if you want to get cross-domain personal data from But when we start to use it, when we go to the stage where we have this view where everyone have their own personal AI, and the personal AI will help them interact with different services or different other people's personal AI. In that world, we are saying like it's completely B2C and it's completely permissionless. We don't want to do BD there. We don't want to like go to say like Perplexity and say, hey, can I offer my API of preference to you? But more like we just put the preference data there and see how the world leads us. Because I feel like when it doesn't involve user data and privacy, it's like an inherent problem, right? You're born as a Web3 user, but you're also Web2 user, Web1 user. You need to inherit all the data there. But then when you are truly like a Web3 user, you should be kind of a personal AI that can easily like do social things to create a different service relations with other AI in a free way. And our entire blockchain protocol is designed for more like the B2C view, where it's like we are a platform and different user or small services, small agent business can like do transactions with each other. David, I don't know if you have different thoughts.
Yeah, similar way, maybe like a slightly different angle is like one way to see the personal AI is it's kind of a gateway into like interacting with external AI agents. So basically, we are focused on the AI side of Pin AI is like this personal AI with access to like contextual data that Bill was talking about. But then on the protocol side, basically, we want this to be a gateway and like allow you to like basically tap into like these external AI agents. And the external ones can be like an affiliate agent for like some online business. It can be like something that is offering a service directly, or it can also be the personal AI of someone else. So in that sense, we are a bit agnostic, maybe like similar to how Story is now. That like we basically want to build this like a protocol infrastructure to like make these exchanges, and then like let's see what will pop up. Like maybe it requires. I don't know if you guys are still doing like some BD in the sense that like you try to like integrate like and have like some bigger entities like built on Story. And then you have kind of like the openness for the like long tail of like individuals, but it may also require these hybrid approaches we discussed.
I think we think about it similarly, where the technology is agnostic, and then as an entrepreneurs, you have like a go-to-market strategy. You kind of figure out, okay, what's the right order of operations that gets the most people to experience the benefits. And so, I mean, we're still trying to figure that out. I mean, this kind of conversation made me think about like, are we going back to almost like I don't know what the right word is, but almost like artisanal model of service where, I'd imagine, like 500 years ago, like you wanted something done. You wanted to like get, build some furniture, right? Like you wanted a bed frame or a bench or something, right? I don't know. I'm not 500. I'm not from 500 years ago, but
you're in Florida.
You need something, right? You gotta, I don't know, lend some money. You got to build some furniture. You kind of go to the local person, right? And you probably know who that is. There's no yellow pages, right? So you just have to have like knowledge of who's going to provide that service. And every village, every town, every city had that own local knowledge. And I could actually see like something like Pin AI being really interesting because now anyone can build software very easily. Anyone can build unique differentiated services. And with Pin AI, it's connecting these services together, right? So you might have your own like local orbit of people where, like, your friend or your, in your DAO or whatever community it is, like you have someone who's providing a service and that all the revenue is going to them. Like they're a service provider. They're not like this large company who you have no access to or connection with. I could almost see like this model reemerging now that you don't have geographical distance and now everyone can provide their own like set of services, right? So like I might be able to go to Bill's profile and see what services he offers. And those could be agents themselves. It could be access to his data, whatever it is. But like I could see that kind of like more networked peer-to-peer model of service provision becoming popular. It's almost like SaaS. It's almost like an extension of SaaS in some ways, but like instead of Microsoft being companies, it's like Microsoft. It's like, what unique service can you provide that even a large corporation might not be able to, and then I can go directly to you.
Yeah. And I'm curious in terms of like a story. You've been building this like a global geographic of users, right? And like where are the like what do you see the difference in like a different regions of user and their behavior? And I know you guys have like a strong Korean presence,
right?
Like what are the users there like? Since we are still learning how to like working with different groups of users.
The fun thing about crypto is that it's super global, right? So you get to go, I guess we're not in Bangkok right now, but yeah, I'm actually I'm pretty good with staying here, honestly. But anyways, no, I mean, it is fun to travel and understand new like cultures, and especially working with IP, you get to interact very closely with the culture itself, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing, like a couple things I've noticed about Korea, where we have a lot of team members and where we're really focused, and one of the reasons why we are focused is because there's two things that are true of Korea. One is that IP is a household term to people in Korea. And so you think about IP in the US, if you're in Hollywood, like you get it, right?
Yeah,
but it's not like if you say IP to other people, they think, okay, well, it's some lawyer thing that I'm not supposed to understand, right? Like that's kind of the general median person in the US. They don't really get that term. But if you're in Hollywood, obviously you understand it. In Korea, everyone understands IP. In fact, the media will say, like this new IP, right? Like Blackpink is an IP or BTS is an IP. That term and the value of content is very well understood because it's a core part of, I would say, their national identity as well as their economy, right? In a way that it's not true of the US. Is of course true for LA, but not true of the rest of the US. So it's really great because people there understand why it's so important to have this new infrastructure and this new system around intellectual property because it's so valuable and that value is well understood by people. The second is, I mean, related to IP is that obviously Korea is the producer of most of the interesting new IP. If you think, I mean, obviously the US has interesting IP, but it's like Spider-Man. This is like the 15th version of Spider-Man, right? Or Avengers. Like, yet again, like what crossover can we do? What sequel can we do? In 2022, I actually think it was 10 out of the top 10 grossing films in the box office were all sequels. Not a single new content, right? And those are still very profitable IPs, but in Korea, you have Parasite, you have K-pop, you have like interesting new content being created. So that's also very exciting. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of why Korea is interesting from an IP perspective. But then from a blockchain perspective, Korea and Asia in general, one thing I've noticed that's very exciting is that in the US, the typical like powerful or influential person in crypto, like they got their power, influence, wealth, what have you, through crypto. So it's someone who was in Bitcoin in 2012 and they just never sold, right? And so now they have all this influence. Whereas in Korea, and so my point is there in the US, it's not like the Googles of the world that really like care about crypto. It's like these people who are very crypto native. Yeah. And so from an institutional perspective, there's less of a voice for crypto. That changed with the election, right? But like historically speaking, the institutions in the US do not like blockchain. It's individuals, and often like individuals who are willing to believe in something like Bitcoin in 2012. So like more fringe, right? Whereas in Asia, it's people who have already or institutions who have already, kind of generated a lot of wealth and influence, or existing institutions like Samsung or Kakao or Naver that are massive conglomerates that they do respect and want to get into blockchain. So you have a completely different way of seeing crypto where it's like actually quite institutionally accepted for whatever reason. And so I think in Asia, like there's a much more direct route to top-down institutional adoption than there is in the US, where until probably very recently, like every institution on every side of the aisle was like skeptical of blockchain, right? And FTX largely affected Americans. Like I think there's reasons for this, but that is an interesting feature of the Asian market that I think is really exciting because it allows you to actually make really transformative change much faster because these institutions are willing to take risks. They're willing to adopt like the future. And I think that's another big reasons why like we have a lot of good adoption.
Yeah. Do you see that like propagate to Japan? Since I know Japan is like slowly getting to.
I think it's true of Japan, it's true of China. I think it's most true in Korea, where you're seeing like just so much volume and retail interest. And like I think that's the vanguard, but it's definitely more true in anywhere in Asia than it is in the US, 100%.
Yeah. I see. Yeah, and how do you see like for PNI to be popular in Korea? Like, what's your suggestion for us?
I mean, I think the concept will resonate highly with the Asian market. I think that in general they're more experimental with their technology, and part of it is almost like leapfrogging, right? Like you think about why China doesn't use credit cards. Well, because they don't they have something better. They have this like arguably, right? They have like very easy mobile payments. Like they're way ahead of the US. It's not because the US is like we're all so bad at building fintech, but it's because we have something that was good enough. And there's like moving to the Tencent Alipay model or WeChat Pay model is just it's not worth the investment, right? Yeah. So like you have like 80% there. So I think like with Asia, there's like this real like leapfrog ability where they can actually leapfrog America and the West on like user interfaces, right? Because you think about delightful design, you think about Figma, or you think about these American brands. Like that's not necessarily true of Asian brands, but then at the same time, it's their opportunity to like leapfrog the US. So I think with AI too, like they were looking for an edge, and I think like Pin is definitely offering an edge. So I mean, it could be very exciting to have this global market, whereas in the US it's so saturated, especially here in Silicon Valley. Like it's so saturated in some ways.
And maybe the other angle is that in the US there is like this huge, powerful giant that kind of cornered the market.
Yeah.
I mean, in the case of credit card, it's also because like Visa.
Exactly.
Networks to like kind of or like it start to like remove them from that position. I think with like Web 2 or AI now, like it may be similar because you have these huge giants that are really building like targeted to like the US market. And one way to see Pin is that basically we can bring this like utility and power of AI outside, right? And not just Asia, but Europe.
And that's so true of like stable coins too, right? Like it doesn't really make that much sense to push really hard on stable coins here because like we use the international reserve currency every day in the US. But you go to Argentina, that's how you bootstrap that initial base that then makes the network effect so large that it's valuable for a US user to be on stable coins. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
And eventually it'll come back, right? Once like the whole world is like using stable coins on chain, the whole world is using like personal AI network, then once the utility is high enough, basically that's when you can really discover it's like.
And it's interesting, like now, you see like Stripe, they paid $1 billion to acquire Bridge. And why? Well, I mean, Stripe, I'm not a fintech expert, but I'd imagine they probably don't really like Visa, MasterCard that much. They have to work with them. But like Visa, MasterCard take this massive interchange fee, and then Stripe is basically like, okay, now I'm going to take a small fee on top. But that fee is dictated by how much, you have like amount of fees that consumers are willing to pay, right? So it's Visa, MasterCard have pricing power. So they're going to take like the massive chunk of that. Stripe gets a little tiny little bit on the edge. Stable coins, no one owns the network, right? And so Stripe can be the network. They can be directly integrated in the gateway. They don't have to worry about this interchange. And I think that could happen big time with AI, right? Where you have like, the foundation model companies of today, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, DeepMinds, like those are like the Visa and the MasterCards. And they're basically, if you're building a GPT wrapper, like they're going to take this much and you get to charge like a tiny bit on top. And Pin could be, the stable coin that like the stripes of AI, what I would say like GPT wrappers, not to say that Stripe is GPT wrapper, but like these sort of marginal services on top of the network could really benefit from like integrating with you guys.
Yeah, it's actually a great point. As I also noticed somehow like our current real user are actually a lot of like young users that are like in Asia, in all these places where they were like amazed by the like fact that you can actually like have all your data and then connect with all the agents. I think for Silicon Valley people are kind of already educated, so like play with all these different like AI products that they like it, but they would not be amazed. But for a lot of the other places, they are playing with like a Telegram mini app or like finger swiping games, and now they say, I can actually like play with the AI agent in Telegram mini app. They were like very pumped about this. Yeah.
Sweet.
Cool. Yeah, cool.
This was fun.
So thanks so much everyone for
thank you guys
listening to us.
Thank you. Thanks.
And I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Cool.